Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Zoo School Live. I know that we said that you were going to meet Peachfuzz, but instead you're going to meet Elisa, the bearded dragon. Just kidding, you'll be meeting Peachfuzz too. So, before we get started, we're going to view some awesome art that was made. And first off, we have Rosie, the tarantula, made by Amelia Rose. So you guys share part of the same name. Fantastic. She got all the legs and the eyes. Amelia Rose, that is some awesome artwork. And Mikey, age 7, drew Sydney. And Amelia and Mikey are from Gilbertsville, and you can even see that Sydney has that blue tongue. You guys are remembering all of those special adaptations of our wonderful education ambassador animals. Awesome job, Amelia and Mikey. Thank you so much for sharing your artwork. We really appreciate that. So we're going to talk about the desert habitat today, right? So deserts, as you can see here, not a lot of green stuff, right? Compared to yesterday where we learned about grassland and scrubland regions with Sandy the gopher tortoise. A lot of luscious green vegetation, not so much with the desert, right? So you have some vegetation, right? You have a lot of cacti that are good at holding water because it doesn't often rain as much in the desert as compared to a temperate zone like where we live in Pennsylvania, or a rainforest, which we'll get to later in the week. This particular desert picture is really sandy, and some characteristics of a desert might be dry, hot, but unlike some other areas where there's lots of humidity, lots of water in the air, it's usually very arid. So it's really dry, hot air, right? Not a lot of vegetation, and compared to some other types of habitats in the world where there's lots of luscious vegetation and animals, it's not as often that you'll see many different variety of animals and plants in the area. So, without further ado, we're going to meet Peachfuzz, the bearded dragon. And Peachfuzz here is one of our senior reptiles. So Peachfuzz is going to be 12 years old. We don't know his exact birth date, but he's around 12. And that's really pretty old for a bearded dragon. These guys in human care can live over 10 years. They only live to be about 3 or 5 in the wild. These guys are native to, so native, remember, means that that's where they're originally from, the eastern parts of Australia. So these guys are in a desert region that is very hot and very dry, just like the desert that we just explained, right? So Peachfuzz here is, again, 12 years old, much older than a bearded dragon that you would find living in the wild that only might make it to maybe 3 or 5 years old. And he really likes the warm weather. So in his enclosure, it's very similar setup. He has some rocks and some bark that he can climb on. He has some wooden hides, but the substrate, the material on the ground in his enclosure, is sand. So that mimics the type of habitat that he would be living in if he were a wild bearded dragon. So very hot, very dry, with the sun beating down very strongly in Australia. So what he does in his enclosure is he likes to sit on top of one of his wooden hides so that he can get even more closely to his heat lamp. His heat lamp is his favorite thing. He loves to be warm and toasty. And just like we talked about with reptiles a couple weeks ago, these guys, if they get too hot, what they'll do is they will go into a shady spot that's not as warm. We have to kind of monitor Peachfuzz a little bit more since he is much older to make sure that he's not standing or sitting under his heat lamp for prolonged periods of time. He has a little bit of trouble moving just because, again, he's a little bit older, but he makes out just fine. So I bet some of you guys are wondering or already know why this species of lizard is called a bearded dragon. So if we take a look underneath his chin here, there's these spikes. And right now, these scales, these spiky scales, are this beige color, but in between those spiky scales are a darker color. The reason why these guys are called bearded dragons is because they display a behavior that they use to protect themselves. And that behavior is blowing up their chin and making it nice and dark and black. And what that does is that it makes it look like he has a gaping mouth, a much larger mouth than his mouth actually is. And his mouth is pretty wide. So these little holes on the sides of his head are his ears. And I think that you can see the line of his mouth. Oh, he closing his eyes. The line of his mouth goes all the way up to that ear. He likes head scratchies. Oh, yeah. So his mouth is already pretty big, but blowing up his chin and his cheeks and puffing out those spikes and turning it black make his mouth look even bigger, so that predators might be like, oh boy, that's scary. I might not want to mess with this guy. Those spikes actually also kind of harden if he feels like he's in danger. So when he puffs those out, so when I was touching him right now, those spikes are not hard. They look dangerous, but they're actually pretty soft and smooth, like the rest of his body right now, because right now he's pretty calm. So some behaviors you might see if you were trying to wonder if your bearded dragon was content, that's another word for happy, or if he was in some sort of distress, might be if he were opening his mouth and heavy breathing, if he's black bearding, so that's what we call when he puffs up that beard, or if he's really flat like a pancake. Those are all possible indications that he's not very happy. So he's not doing any of those behaviors. So that means that he's pretty chill right now. He's just laying in that sand and having a good old time. So these guys are a diurnal species. So what that means is that they're active during the day, just like us humans, and sleep at night. They are also solitary, like many of the animals that we have shown you. That means that he is perfectly fine with having his alone time. He is not lonely. He does live in his own enclosure, but he lives with the rest of our education reptiles. So they all are neighbors. So he has neighborly friends that he can see if he so chooses, but if he doesn't want to see them, he can just go under his hide. But he has his own house, and he likes it that way. If he were a female bearded dragons lay a lot of eggs. They can lay up to 24 eggs in a clutch, and they can actually have 9 clutches a year. That's a lot of eggs. So these guys are pretty prevalent around Australia. They're also a relatively common species of pet, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. The main diet of these guys are crickets and fruits and veggies and lettuce. So these guys are omnivores. They like to eat their meat products as well as their fruits and veggies. So he gets a salad. Sometimes we'll supplement his diet with mealworms or waxworms, but he really likes those crickets as well. He does not weigh a lot. He's actually less than a pound, and he came to us from someone who donated him. So that's where he came from. Oh, hello there. Okay, you're gonna lick the dirt. Hi, are you having fun teaching all of the children? I don't really think they want to look at your bottom though, so I'm gonna turn you around, okay, so they can see your beautiful face. There we go. Some other really cool behaviors that these guys display is something called waving in circles. So kind of like this, they wave their arm, and that kind of tells other bearded dragons that they recognize each other. I have not really seen Peachfuzz often do that waving behavior. I've only seen him do it like once or twice. So I don't know if he thought that was a bearded dragon. Maybe right now he'll wave to me, and we'll see. Another behavior that these guys do is they bob their heads, kind of similar to what our truckwalla lizards might do. And they do that as another recognition behavior, or also a behavior to impress the lady friends. So we actually have, aside from my bearded dragon self, we have another friend who's going to make a guest appearance, and we're gonna meet her actually right now. So we're just gonna put Peachfuzz away for just a second. Hi, Peachfuzz. Hi, there you go. We're going to meet someone named Smalls. And And Smalls is also a bearded dragon, but Smalls is much younger than Peachfuzz. And she, you can see, looks a little bit different. Not only is she a bit smaller, but she's a lot brighter in her colors. So one of the reasons why Peachfuzz is a little bit more brown and tan and rusty colored is because he's older, but also bearded dragons come in a variety of different colors. So they can be this yellowish color, tannish color, brown, yellow. Some even have a little bit of red tints to them. So they come in lots of different kinds of colors. And the reason why we brought Smalls out to make a guest appearance is because we're going to see if she would like to show you how she eats those crickets that she loves so much. So we're going to sprinkle some crickets that she loves in this little exhibit here. And we're gonna just have you guys enjoy her having her lunch today. All right, Smalls, there you go. Have fun. So Smalls here is a little bit more speedy than Peachfuzz. She doesn't have the slight arthritis that he has, but you can see these guys are similar in their limbs to the chuckwalla lizards that we met. They're sideways, right? And they're flat and low to the ground. So another indication that these guys are similar to chuckwallas in that they are ground-dwelling lizards. One very easy way to tell is because Smalls here isn't green. A lot of lizards that live in trees are green. I know, it's true, Smalls, it's true. And another way, and you'd have to look a little bit more closely to her feet, are her nails. So her nails might look sharp in the video, but they're actually not sharp at all. Lizards that have sharp claws are more likely to live in trees because they need those sharp claws to grip onto tree bark so that they don't fall off of the trees. Now, Smalls doesn't really have any need to be climbing trees, doesn't really need to have really, really sharp claws. So they use those longer, more sturdy, duller claws to sometimes dig for bugs, but not to climb. Let's see if we can get some of these crickets on the other side for you over there. Good job, Smalls. Good job. While we're still looking at Smalls eat, we're going to talk a little bit more about some adaptations that these guys have. So they have those spikes again, right, to protect themselves that harden if they feel that they're threatened. They also black beard in order to look big and scary. The other really cool feature that these guys have that we talked slightly about with the chuckwalla lizards is that third eye. So remember, it's not really an eye that looks like the two eyes that we have on our faces, but that third eye is right on the top of their head. So right about here. And that third eye helps to detect shadows. So again, some predators that these guys might have would be some larger lizards out in Australia. There's lots of different things that could eat these guys. Dingoes also really like to eat these guys. A lot of animals that would prey upon bearded dragons, however, would be different types of birds of prey. So if birds of prey are flying overhead, these guys can detect that shadow, that thing that's blocking the sun, and they might run away from whatever is chasing them because they were able to see that shadow in the sky with that third eye. All right? I think we got a couple crickets left there, Smalls. Crawling under all the rocks here. All right, guys. So I think we're going to start asking some questions. And while we do so, we're going to just have Small stay in her little terrarium over here. And we took Peachfuzz out again, just so you can look at him while we're answering your questions, all right? It looks like a lot of people are asking, a lot of people have one at home. That's really, really cool. So yes, I forgot we were gonna go back to the pet information, right? So I preface this by saying that you should research always before you get a pet. That being said, these guys are a decent pet if you don't mind housing feeding crickets in your house. So they can't just have that lettuce and make your lives a little bit easier with those fruits and veggies, right? They also need that meat product, that protein. So these guys are relatively docile. That means they're calm-tempered and sweet, and they don't take a whole bunch of care. That doesn't mean that you should never handle them, but they're not as high maintenance as, let's say, a dog or a parrot. So that's really cool that a lot of people have these guys as pets at home. Oh, we have some names of these bearded dragons at home. We have Kiki and Fireball. Those are fantastic names, you guys. Thanks for sharing your pets with us. It looks like Liam would like to know why they're called bearded dragons. Good question, Liam. So I'm going to recap that again for those of you who might have missed it. These guys are called bearded dragons because of their chin that they use to blow up, to puff out, to make it look like they have this giant beard. And when they puff it out, not only does it look like a beard, but it kind of looks like a giant mouth. And they use that to scare away predators from coming near them. So if they make themselves look really, really big and scary, it's less likely that a predator might want to eat them. So that's why they're called bearded dragons. Luke and Gray would like to know if he has a split tongue. Fantastic question, you guys. So he does not. And a lot of our omnivorous lizards do not have that split tongue, right? Not all of them, but a lot of them. So we have Tango that we met, right? Remember Tango the tegu? So she is technically an omnivore, but she definitely eats bigger prey. And she uses that split tongue just like a snake in order to find those bigger prey items. It's possible that Peachfuzz might, in the wild, eat some small rodents, but very, very small baby rodents. That's not going to be the majority of his diet. The majority of the protein that he's going to be getting is from insects, so he's not going to be using his tongue to smell. So no, he does not have a split tongue. Fantastic question. Looks like Eli and Luca want to know if their scales are rough. Yes, yes. So remember the other desert animals that we met, like Hoggle, the hognose snake? He had those rough scales. They're actually super similar in texture and color to Peachfuzz. So Peachfuzz has this rough scales and this coloration that he has in order to blend in with the sand and the dirt in the desert. Same thing with Hoggle, the hognose snake. So both Hoggle and Peachfuzz here are desert animals, and they both have those rough scales. Absolutely. Hunter V would like to know how he got to the zoo. Great question, Hunter. He was actually a donation, so someone donated him to the zoo. So that's how he ended up living here at Elmwood. Zachary would like to know when his birthday is. Zachary, I'm so sorry to tell you that we actually don't know his exact date of birth since he was donated from someone else. However, we do know that he is about 12 years old, which is actually pretty darn old for a bearded dragon. And does he have any family? Most likely, yes. Remember, we talked about those eggs. They have about 24 eggs in a clutch and 9 clutches a year. So he most definitely had some sisters and brothers. However, none of his siblings live here at the zoo. Grace would like to know, what does he do during the day? Oh, Grace, he likes to lounge around. That is Peachfuzz's most favorite activity. Remember, he's an older guy, so he likes to sit on top of his wooden hide, and he likes to just bathe and bask under that heat lamp that he has. That's probably his favorite activity, is napping. Sierra would like to know how long they can get in the wild. Very good question, Sierra. So they can get just about as long as Peachfuzz is here. And I would like to think that that's probably 1.5 feet in length, with that tail being very similar to the chuckwalla lizards, where the tail takes up half the length of their body. They might be getting a little bit bigger in Australia, where they're eating slightly larger prey items, but he's a decent sized dragon, but he wasn't always that way. So really quick, because everybody likes his background story, when he was born, he was called the runt of the litter. So what that means is that out of all of his siblings, he was the smallest, and all of the siblings were able to run around right away and get the items that they needed to grow, but he was struggling a little bit because he was so tiny. And the spikes around him were so small. They were soft, and they resembled that of the fuzz on a peach, and that's why he was called Peachfuzz. So he was actually nurtured by one of the zoo employees, and he made it, thankfully, and he grew up to be a normal-sized lizard. Isn't that right, Peachfuzz? Yeah. Liam and Ronan, can he grow a new tail? Ooh, that's a good question. You know, I don't think that he can. So we talked about our blue-tongue skink, Sydney, right? And they have the ability to regenerate their tail once. This is a lizard that is not able to do that. Great question, Liam and Ronan. And does he shed his skin, and how often? Wonderful. So we're actually going to take a look at those back legs of his, and you can see that they're kind of a different shade of color than the rest of his body. And that is an indication that he is getting ready to shed those scales on those parts of his body. So he absolutely does shed, and it's different than a snake, where they're more on schedule, I could say, with their shedding, where they shed probably once a month. These guys shed in pieces, so there might be parts of their body that have already shed, so you can tell like the top of his head and on the upper part of his back, it's already brightly colored, whereas this is more opaque and dull in coloration on his back legs. So this part most likely already shed, and we're waiting on his back legs to shed. So they're kind of shedding all the time in different pieces. That's what lizards tend to do. Keith and Ava would like to know how his eyesight is, and do they have good night vision? Wonderful question, Keith and Ava. So their eyesight is decent. They don't have huge eyes, so it's not, amazing as, let's say, an owl or a hawk. And he has that third eye, right? That the eye on the top of his head to help him detect shadows. But remember, he's diurnal. So he does not have very good night vision because he's active during the day and sleeps more at night. So his eyesight is average, I would say. Amber would like to know how fast he is. Definitely not as fast as Smalls, Amber. You can see this is pretty much the speed at which he goes, which is not at all. When he gets excited for his crickets, he might scamper away pretty quickly. However, the species in general can move very fast. They are adept to run swiftly on that sand, so the species in general can be very quick. Kira and Laura would like to know how much they weigh and when they were born. Great question. I'm not really sure about Smalls, so I'll have to look that up for you when we can answer your questions. But he weighs just less than a pound, so he's not very heavy at all. Brooke would like to know what he eats. So Peachfuzz and Smalls both get the same diet. So they get crickets and a salad. So the salad is a variety of different types of greens and a variety of different kinds of fruits and vegetables. And they get crickets as their protein. Sometimes we'll give them some extra little protein snacks like mealworms or waxworms. Zachary would like to know if Peachfuzz likes people. I would say that Peachfuzz is very accustomed to people. So he's been handled his whole life. When he was donated, he was handled before he was given to the zoo. Not particularly sure what he's interested in looking at right now, but it's kind of cute with that little head tilt. He is not afraid when he gets handled or picked up. I can tell you, however, when we go on our Zoo on Wheels programs, which of course aren't occurring right now, hopefully soon, but when we go off-site to teach programs, there's different facilities that have different buildings, and we have found out that buildings with low ceilings and ceiling fans and dangling decorations are definitely not his favorite. And we were able to tell that because he was showing signs of stress. So he flattened out and looked like a pancake, and he had his mouth open, and he was turning his beard black. So what we do when that happens is we tell our guests that unfortunately our animal is showing some signs of stress, so we're going to put them away for right now. So he has told us with his body language what things he does not like. So we know that ceiling fans and dangling decorations are definitely not his favorite. Mikey would like to know if they are endangered. They are not, Mikey. They are of least concern, according to the IUCN Red List. So these guys in the wild are actually doing A-OK. Fantastic question. Kate would like to know, does Smalls have teeth? Yes, both Peachfuzz and Smalls have teeth there. Very similar to our Chuckwalla friends that have small, teeny tiny, razor sharp teeth. All right, so we have 3 more questions as we're taking a look at Smalls over here. Nora would like to know why they're different colors. Because they're different lizards, Nora. Great question. So just like Marissa, our other educator, has, medium brown hair, and our other educator, Laura and Rebecca, they have blonde hair, and I have brown hair. They're the same thing. They just have different colored scales. Again, one of the reasons why Peachfuzz's scales are a little bit more dull in color is just because he's a little bit older. Jace would like to know, what are the holes on the sides of their heads? Fantastic observation and question, Jace. Those are their ears. So just like we talked about before with our lizards not needing what's called cartilage, the stuff that our lobes of our ears are made out of, and the wiggly stuff on the top of our nose, they don't need that stuff. It's just there as kind of extra. So their holes on the sides of their heads are actually their ears. All right, guys, we have one last question. Ellie would like to know, can Peachfuzz breathe fire? Oh, Ellie, I wish that he could. I wish that Peachfuzz here could breathe fire. But I guess luckily for us, he can't, because that would be very dangerous for us educators. Maybe in his dreams, Peachfuzz can breathe fire. So we would definitely like, if you guys have any of your animal costumes at home, if you guys want to make a bearded dragon costume of your own and send us pictures via email to the zoo's email, or post them in the comments, or if you have any other favorite animal dress ups that you would like to show us, we'd be absolutely thrilled to see them. We're going to post a comment that has a related activity so that you guys can keep learning and keep that mind active, right? And if you would like to help the zoo in any way, we would love that, and you can do that by donating to the zoo's emergency fund, which can be found on our website. All right, so that's all from Smalls, myself, and Peachfuzz, and we hope that we will see you guys tomorrow tuning in to see one of our feathery educator friends. All right, thanks guys, bye-bye.